In the previous lesson, we learned how we can watch for the global state changes and rebuild the widgets to reflect changes. So in this lesson, we will be working on updating the global state data so that any consumer tracking global state gets the update. Alright. Now as this theme provider can be accessed by any widget in our widget tree, I'll be working on the settings screen for illustrating how state update works. This file has few codes, so it will be easy to understand, and later we'll be working on theme switcher widget. So here I'll be creating two widgets. First the elevated button with anonymous function in this onPressed, and child with text widget update global state value. And another child will be the text widget with text hello, which will be the consumer of global state. Alright. So what I want to do now is that when this button is clicked, I want to update the global state and see if I can get the update in this text widget. So for that, let's move into this theme provider and create a new string variable. And now I want this text widget to be a consumer of this variable. So for that, let's move into the settings screen, and first we'll be getting the provider in the build method. So var theme provider equals to provider.of context and pass the theme provider over here. So now we have access to this theme provider, so let's replace this text with theme provider.data to update. And here you can see that we are getting the variable value in this text widget. So now I need to change or update this global state value from this onPressed of elevated button. Alright. Now to update the global state variable, you can't simply just access the class and update the variable value like so. So if I do this and click this button, nothing happens because it's only updating the value for this instance and not for the global state. And you can't just simply access this theme provider variable and update the value like so. This will also not work. So how can we update the global state variable? For that, we need to create an updater function in this provider that updates the variable value, and this is how we can do it. So let me create an updater function over here. So void update string data, and this function will have string data as required argument. Alright. And when this function is called, we will update the variable of the state to the data that is passed into this function. So data to update equals to data from this function. So now the most important thing is to notify all the consumers about the state update, and we can do that by calling this notify listeners function. Alright. It's a function provided by this change notifier class. If I do not extend this change notifier class, I can no longer use this notify listeners. So this notify listeners depend on this change notifier class. Alright. This notify listener is like a set state but for the global variables. This function will notify all consumer about the update of state. So instead of directly updating the variable data from theme provider, we will call the updater function that we just created, which will then update the value of the state and notify all consumers about the state change. So theme provider.update string data, and this data argument will have the string that needs to be updated. So now if I click this button, then global state variable is updated and all consumers are notified about the update. So now we know how we can update the state data, so let's use this knowledge on theme switcher. This code here was only for the learning purpose, so let's remove it. So now let's move into this theme switcher, and first thing to do here is to get the theme provider in build method. Now move into the switch widget on change, and here we'll be updating the boolean variable value of theme provider. So theme provider dot, and we do not have this updater function of this boolean value, so let's move into this theme provider, and here we no longer need this string, so let's remove it and change this function name to update mode, and required data will be a boolean with variable name dark mode. Alright, and this function will update the state variable with the dark mode data from the function. So let's move into this theme switcher again, and here theme provider dot update mode, and this dark mode is equal to the value of the switch widget. Alright, so this will now update the global state according to the widget value. So now if I switch this, entire theme of our app is updated because global state boolean value is being updated by the switch widget, and consumer of material app is watching for the change and updating the theme accordingly. So now let's remove this boolean from here because we will only be using the provider value for managing state in this widget. Alright. So the default value of the switch widget is now the provider value. So theme provider dot is dark mode checked. And now let's remove this. And let's use provider value here as well. So now we have fully functional theme switcher in our app, which is powered by provider's global state management. So now we have a minor issue in our app. If we restart the app, theme data will be resetted to default value because global state is only preserved until the app runs. And if we need to preserve the data, we need to save it using local storage. So in the next lesson, we will be working on preserving data for theme mode. So I'll see you at the next lesson.